Hello and welcome to the help for the AYSO area scheduling. My name is John Price and I'll facilitate scheduling. So this is just to help new schedulers to know what to expect for the area scheduling that we do. So what you'll do is you'll get a link to this Google Docs which you see on the screen, and that updates every season. And you'll also get a call-in number or a way to call in, and so we'll have a conference call. So everybody that's involved in the scheduling will call in, and then I'll facilitate going through the scheduling process. So as you can see on the screen, we're on the U14, but it'll be the same for all of them as far as the process. We'll go through each week one at a time with the available teams that are over here. And these teams are based on what I have ahead of time information-wise by how many teams each region has. So, all the team names start with the region number, 160, 498, 894, and so on. And then the division and so on. So I need to get that information ahead of time. If you haven't sent it, let me know. Before we get started, you should take a look at that, and also this teams tab. This is old data, but just for your region, and make sure that at least we have the right count of teams, because it's a lot harder to add a team or take a team away. We have to cancel games if we take a team away. Adding games is harder because everybody's already going to have a game scheduled every week after we're done. And if you try to add a new game, a new team to that, then you have to create new games, and it's more difficult. So it's much easier if we get all that set up right ahead of time. So basically, once we get started, if you have some pre-scheduling that you did, like especially if you have several teams, and there's only 2 or 3 per region, but other divisions, regions have quite a few other teams, especially in the younger ages. So they'll schedule several other teams just to play each other in house, and then have a couple travel and a couple stay home, and people travel with them. So if you have all that nailed down ahead of time, at least as a go by that we can, get started with, and we'll get those out of the way. Just tell me what those are for every week, and then we'll schedule what's left, either traveling them to different places or they'll come to your region depending on the situation. So for example, and then I guess once we get going, this is what we'll do. If we decide, okay, we're going to send this team number 1 to Dublin, then they'll play in the way, and then we'll have to have a Dublin team that play them. Maybe somebody's going to come to the Calvary Baptist place, and so somebody volunteers to come to them, and we might have 2 of them come over here. Whoop. And so we just do things like this, and so we just go through it. If everything works out, then we end up with no more teams. If we have an even number of a total for the boys and the girls, then that makes it great, because then we can we don't have to try to do any finagling to get enough games. If it's an odd number of teams, then we have to make a decision. One region will usually have to either play a double or a bye, or what we recently have been doing is actually doing what we call a mini round robin, where we have 3 teams and they play half with each team. So example, if I was gonna, with these girls, let's just say I'm gonna have, let me just delete these others so make it easier. Alright, so say these 3 girl teams here are gonna play a mini round robin at Dublin. Just throwing it out there. So what we do is, whoop, that was a mistake. So we'll take team 1, I'll play, one of the other teams, and then we'll have team 2 play. Let's see how we do it. Take this one, copy it here. Take this one, copy it here, and then let's delete the number 2 game here, but like that. Okay. So, you know, usually U14 games are what, 70 minutes a piece. So instead of them being a usual 70 minutes, they would only be half that, so it'd be 35 because everybody's playing a half of a game. So this team would play this team just for half, then this team would play this team for a half, right? So between number 1 team for the 160, between those 2 games, they played a whole game worth of game. But we're also taking care of 3 teams. So, you know, if you care about score and all, it makes it more difficult because that team played one team on the first half and the other team on the second half, so it makes it more difficult if you're trying to use the scores to determine somebody's going to be in a tournament or something. But we usually don't do that, especially in the spring. We're just not concerned about that. So if that's the case, then this works pretty good. It takes care of our odd teams, and it also lets everybody play, but it's not a double, which is too much, and it's not a bye, which we want everybody to play. So this is I feel like a pretty good compromise. Everybody gets to play, you know, a full game's worth of game time, but at the same time, we're taking care of the odd number of teams. So that's what we usually do. That's something you should check with your region and see if for some reason you got a coach or maybe your region just doesn't want to do that. And if they don't, then you can pick one of the other 2. And, you know, if you're willing to play a double in your region, or, well, it doesn't have to be in your region, but if you're going to play a double one of your teams, then, you know, usually we can find the other 2 teams will travel to you just to take care of it because we want all our kids to play. All right, so enough of that. So I guess let me just talk a little bit about the homework that the division coordinator or the scheduler needs to do ahead of time. And I've got these example tabs down here, which will be on the sheet, so you can take a look at those. Now these are just examples of how you could do it, and you don't have to use them, and you don't have to do it this way, but this is just something to get you thinking about what you need to do, because you do need to think ahead on some kind of scheduling scheme, and then, you know, you need to be flexible, because when we get into it, we may have to tweak it around some, but at least you're going in with a plan, and that's what I need you to do. Try to come up with an initial plan of what you're thinking, and then usually we just go with that plan, but sometimes, you know, you have to adjust. So if you had 2 teams, you know, if you got 1 or 2 teams, then you're going to have to travel a lot. I mean, it's because really you only get to play your other team once or twice, and then that's pretty boring. And so the rest of the time, you need to either have somebody come to you or they need to travel somewhere else. And usually you try to make that about 50-50 between when they come to you and when they go. So that's what this is doing here with 2 teams. We start out the first week with them just playing each other, and that's what I mean by the red here. It's just means that they're not travel or home. So when I mean travel, what I mean is you're going to actually, this team's going to go to another region and play with another region's team. Home means that it's still an area game, but instead of you traveling, you're going to stay home and somebody's going to come to you. So, you know, this is one way to do it. Now, one thing you need to think about as far as flexibility is that if you are in this situation and we ended up with odd number of teams, then it might make more sense instead of have 1 travel and 1 stay home. Well, no, I guess it doesn't matter. Never mind. Anyway, so you could have both teams travel the same week and then both teams stay home the same week. We've had regions do that, and there's nothing wrong with that. Or you can alternate it like we got here. You know, so this is just one example of multiple ways to do it. I've got them playing again about halfway through the season. You may want to, which I wouldn't mind doing, you know, usually after 3 or 4 weeks, it's okay to play them again. It's kind of interesting to see if they've improved over the season a little bit. You could have that all the way towards the end instead, So that's just kind of up to you. For a 3-team season, it gets a little more difficult. Well, it's just a different way of thinking because you're already got an odd number. You can have 2 of your teams playing, but one of them's going to have to be an area game. And you just rotate who plays each other. And that's what I got down here. You know, got 1 versus 2 playing at home with each other. And then number 3 is traveling. And, you know, each week you just kind of lay this thing out. Now, you know, occasionally we really need to have somebody to break up one of these home teams to accommodate a scheduling thing. Just depends. So, you know, that's where I'm talking about be flexible. You may have to actually have team 1 and team 2 travel sometimes when you're planning on them playing each other. We'll rotate if we have to adjust things like that. I'll try to be fair about it. You know, like if your region does it one week, then it doesn't have to do it again next week. We'll have other regions try to accommodate and change their schedule, whatever they need to get the game scheduled. We just want to try to stay focused on the fact that we want all our kids to play, and so we need to be a little flexible. But beyond that, I understand you got to do what you got to do. For 4 teams, it's a little easier. And then this again is just an example, but you can see at the bottom I got 2 teams playing each other, and then we got 2 of them doing area. You might want to start out with the first week each of them playing each other all at once and no traveling at all. If that's what your region wants to do, that's fine. I know some regions like to do that. So however you want to do it. There again, I mean, you need to be talking to your region. You need to be talking to your coaches. Here's 5, and it's kind of the same thing, except for now you've got 2 teams playing each other and 1 of them traveling. So, you know, for U10, maybe U12 teams, you want to not do a whole lot of traveling because the younger kids, you just don't need to make them travel as much. So, but usually you have more teams, so it's not as hard. So, it depends on the region. So just, you know, use what makes sense in your region, but at least I guess the bottom line is please go think about what you want to do. Give it some thought, plan out at least a default plan, be ready to adjust it as needed, but at least you got something going in. So once you get that figured out, you come into the telecon and you're listening and what these gaps are for that I've got here. I mean, this was supposed to be kind of an example. You could just print this out and use it, figure out what you want to do. But the gaps are for when you want to actually write down what you really scheduled to help you track who played who, so that if things change, especially from your plan, then you can make a note in there. And so if you have someone coming to you and it was team 1 from 160, well then later on playing your team 2, but later on when you got them coming again, you don't want to play 162 again if there's another team to play. So tracking who comes to you and who you go play is something that helps us stay, and it is going to end up being on the sheet, right? And you'll be able to see this because you'll be on Google Docs and you can scroll this thing up and down, but it's just a little more difficult to scroll up and down and check things like that because there's a lot. This is kind of dense. So if you track it individually just for your region, then usually that's because that's your focus, and that helps you kind of focus on your region's games. I think that's just about it. Just make sure you send in your information, and appreciate everything you do for AYSO, and hope you have a great day. Thanks. So I failed to mention a couple things that I want to add real quick. First is when we get started, you want to make sure that these time slots are what you want for your region, and you can predetermine this, or you can just leave them open and we can type in times. If you use predetermined slots, it makes it a lot easier to make sure that you don't end up scheduling multiple games on top of each other, because if we have to type in the time, we got to make sure we do the math and make sure they don't overlap. So it's easier if you come in with at least a default plan, and a lot of regions do that, and it helps out. The other thing I wanted to mention that I failed to mention previously is for these odd teams where you've got home or travel, you do want to write down if you ended up staying home or traveling, because, for example, this team 1, you don't want them traveling 3 times, right? Well, and then this guy, team 2, might be staying home twice. So if team 1 traveled the first time away, then you want to try to keep them home next time, right? And if you need to travel just because you've already got your fields full or whatever, and the only team that's left is team 1, well, there's nothing wrong with keeping you from saying, you know what, all right, on this week 2, instead of 2 and 3 playing, I'm just going to make it team 1 and 3 playing, which is the next one. Kind of take these 2 and switch them around, so that way number 2 can travel or stay home, whichever. But I guess it. So I'm just saying you can switch these around if you need to. There's a little bit of flexibility, but the idea is you want to try to make it fair for all your teams, to minimize the amount of traveling that they all do, so you don't end up having one team traveling 3 times and then the other one only traveling 1 or 2. Okay, just spread that out so that everybody's not traveling too much. Now, if you got a coach that wants to travel, or and you've talked to them, that's fine. But you just want to think about not making your parents and your players travel without at least knowing that's what you're doing and you're consciously doing that. So anyway, I just want to bring up those 2 things. Appreciate all you guys do. Have a great day.